Right, beer tasting, here we go. Beer tasting is not really all that easy. The human brain's not very well equipped to take something that it smells or tastes and turn it into descriptions and vocabulary. I mean, as humans have evolved, we've had the ability to taste things purely for the reason we wanted to know whether it's nutritious, so we were attracted to fats and proteins and that sort of thing. But speech and describing things in such a complicated way came much, much later in human development, which means trying to marry those two parts of your brain together can be very difficult sometimes. Lots of people say that, oh, I'm not a very good beer taster, oh, don't worry, my review isn't going to be very accurate. Well, no, everybody can taste what they can taste. It's just whether or not, that there are certain flavour descriptors that you read about, that people tell you about, and you learn to associate that, just like in the world of wine, where they have lots of what appear to be quite esoteric words to describe things, and they do all refer to a particular flavour, but you have to kind of practice to get it right. So yeah, these are going to be my beer reviews of the beers I've made. I'm gonna throw that old cliche in there and say I'm not a professional, and these tastings and reviews will just be my impression of it. They might remind me of something, they might remind me of a particular place, or maybe I can even pick up particular flaws and ways of improving the beer, who knows. Well, look at that. So, how have I done with my original idea then? So my original idea, I've got it down a bit of paper there, I said I wanted it to be dark black, bordering on a dark ruby colour, which is absolutely bang on. That's perfect. I've done what I set out to do there. But colour is always one of those things that's slightly easier, to write down and use numbers to figure that out. Flavour is a different kettle of fish. I said I wanted to have a full-bodied, malty backbone, and I think if there is one place where this beer does slip up, it's there. The body is smooth, but it's not full. It's not like a Guinness. I wanted it to be really thick and creamy in the mouth, and I think I know exactly why that is. You may remember from the brew day, I dropped the thermometer into the wort and killed it, which is a shame, but its dying words, the last thing it managed to say was 64.5, and once it was dead, I had no way of checking my mash temperature, which leads me to suspect that maybe my mash temperature, never rose any further than that. And while 64 is within the range of a successful mash, it's not ideal for full-bodied beers. So 66 is right in the middle. That's where you'd expect to get a medium-bodied beer. Down to about 64, 63, you're beginning to favour one of the particular enzymes at work, which is alpha amylase. And the alpha amylase is much better at chopping up all of these long chain sugars into smaller pieces. It does it at random, it does it in the middle of the chain, it does it at branches. When you push the temperature up to about 68, 69, maybe 70, and people do mash at higher temperatures than that, you begin to favour the other enzyme which is at work, which is beta amylase. Now what beta amylase does, if you've got a long chain sugar like this, it just nibbles 2 units off each end and creates a maltose and a maltose. Then goes in one, and a maltose, and a maltose, and maybe even it gets to the top of the branch and takes a maltose off there and a maltose off the bottom or something like that. But the main problem with beta amylase is that it won't chop in the middle. Beta amylase could be at work, far greater than alpha, but at the end of the day, it's only going to chop tiny bits off what is essentially a much larger matrix. So yeah, mashing at 64.5 really is going to favour breaking up those things that are going to give me a thick body into smaller pieces quite readily. So that is definitely something I need to look at. My temperature control is not all that great, and that's a reason for improvement. I also said I wanted the smoke to blend well with the malt base. And you know what? You can barely tell the difference between them. There are some base grains and some darker grains and coloured specialty grains that do have a slight smokiness to them. One of which is Munich malt, has a very slight, almost toasty smokiness to it. And I do think that blends really well with cherrywood, because cherrywood is such a subtle, fruity smoke that just kind of sits nicely in amongst everything rather than standing out and shouting at you. I wanted to reassure myself as well that spruce works in dark beer, and you know what? It does. I was kind of treating spruce like a hop in some ways, and talking about late additions, talking about essential oils and when to add it, whether it's going to give you, and even talking about aromas and flavors like pine and spruce and evergreen. It does conjure up these ideas of hops, when in fact, as I mentioned in episode 1 of this, natural spruce flavor is nothing like spruce car air freshener smell. That's a chemical, one single chemical, in fact, that is designed to be reproduced and put into these kind of air fresheners and things like that. I don't think it's derived from real spruce. Real spruce, fresh spruce flavor is totally different. It's actually much more like dandelion and burdock, and when you think of it like that, you can see why it would work in a dark beer. Dandelion and burdock and dark fruits and smoke. You can kind of see where I was going with it, and it works. Now, I've harvested a lot more spruce than I need, which means I've got the opportunity to make more spruce beers further down the line. One of the things I was considering doing is rebrewing what was Pooh Tree Pale and making it a spruce pale ale of some sort. I was going to experiment with putting spruce in at the very beginning, and then in a separate batch putting spruce in closer to the end and seeing what sort of effect I can get from that. My initial concern was that putting spruce in 10-15 minutes before the end wasn't going to extract what I needed, and it does. It definitely does. So I'm not actually worried about doing that experiment anymore. I might keep doing it this way from now on. One last thing I did say that I wanted this beer to be was piney, and on reflection, that's the complete wrong flavour descriptor to use for this beer, because, as I said, spruce isn't piney. Pine has that kind of certain woodiness to it. It's like almost like fresh cut grass type smell, and that's not what spruce is. Spruce, the flavour in a way, almost contributes to the overall fullness of the beer. It's nice. Now, as for the dry hopped version, while it does bring fresh hop aroma to it, and piney hop aroma to that as well, I almost wonder if that helps you to pick out the spruce flavour that's in there. There are certain things that you could put in beer in small doses that literally just draw your attention to something else that's already there that you might not have tasted. And the Apollo, I think, is one of those. You get this pine smell, and you go, oh, what else is there? And almost the spruce kind of backs it up. However, I'm glad that I did one without that Apollo dry hop, because this is actually the first time I've ever done a spruce beer and partitioned some of it off and not used Apollo. And I find that the spruce flavour is more than capable of holding its own. It makes it more sessionable without that dry hopping, because dry hopping isn't always suited to dark beer, because sometimes that hop character can get in the way of the grains and the dark specialty malts you put in. Right, so on the whole, what would I do different next time? Get my mash temperature right. Other than that, I think the recipe's sound. Maybe it could do with a bit more oatmeal. The mash was fairly solid, so I could have a play around with it, but I think at this stage it is much more about tweaking and actually better process management than changing the recipe. So, for those of you I've promised to give beers to, I'll leave them out in a pub somewhere and let you know where they're going. Appreciate your feedback. Thanks for watching.